that. In that ruling, the justice who was in charge of the proceedings said that a person who possesses sufficient skills to satisfy CASA, that he is competent to perform CASA's own flight testing functions and thus competent to be delegated to perform those functions, does not ordinarily cease to possess those skills the instant his flight instructor rating expires, even though the exercise of his delegated authority to test others is conditional upon his keeping his current rating. So that suggests there's a judicial determination here that suggests that if someone falls outside of the requirements that you set, they don't instantly become unsafe. The judgment then also goes on to say that for people that person might have tested, if the person has passed the necessary flight test and satisfies other relevant requirements for the issuing of a rating, CASA has no discretion to refuse a rating to such a person. So the people that followed, who had done a check under someone who turns out wasn't validly qualified, had completed their test. I don't think there was any doubt that they'd completed the test, and they'd completed the test satisfactorily. Would you agree with that proposition?
Sarah, I might pass over to Dr. Alec, who might be able to provide an interpretation on that.
Thank you. Jonathan Alec, Executive Manager, Legal and Regulatory Affairs. Senator Patrick, we are familiar with the case. We're familiar with all cases that impacted our decisions, particularly those that involve CASA as a party. You're looking to the well-recognized principle that like cases should be decided alike. The complementary provision is that cases that are not quite alike should not be decided the same way. The critical issue is deciding how like they are.
Sure.
And while there are some superficial but not insignificant similarities between the Royal Aero Club case and the Falcon Air situation, there are some fundamental differences. The threshold question is whether it's different as a matter of law. And legally, the most significant difference is that the actions in the Royal Queensland Aero Club involved decisions taken by a delegate of CASA, effectively government decisions, which are normally governed by principles that you can dispense with insignificant administrative aspects if no one's adversely affected by it, and take a decision which is more rational, irrespective of a shortcoming in meeting an administrative requirement. This was not such a situation. This was a situation in which there was a failure to comply with a regulatory requirement.
Now, in that particular case, it involved a chief pilot passing, issuing effectively a flying licence, a pilot's licence, to a number of students.
Yes.
So that person was a delegate of CASA, just in the same manner in which the chief pilot for Falcon Air was a delegate able to check
With respect,
pilots.
Senator, the chief pilot is not a delegate. The chief pilot is an employee of the operator who has the privilege to exercise certain powers under the provisions of the legislation. As I said, it may sound picayune, but legally it's quite significant.
Look, I'm very familiar with in court matters when there is a case. The role of counsel is to differentiate and suggest why that case doesn't apply. The general principles in this situation are that the chief pilot didn't immediately lose his competence. He had 30,000 hours of flying time. Okay, so one would presume that he had some level of competence, and I don't think there's any question that the pilots that he then checked completed their tests.
I take your point, Senator, and I'm appreciative of the fact that you recognize that these issues can be argued. So I'll make two points here. Firstly, if the question is whether we fail to apply as a matter of law a case that would have determined the outcome, that would be concerning. In this case, it doesn't. Are there issues, general principles, as you say, that are informative? They are. The significant issues here on the facts are that, A, as Mr. Carmody indicated earlier on, this wasn't a question of competency, it was a question of proficiency. So no one was questioning the competency of these pilots. They are capable of... Yes, a competency... Well, competency means you're able to do what it is you're authorized to do.
Yes.
So you can operate the aircraft, you know what to do. A proficiency check doesn't put a person in the airplane and say, fly the airplane, do what you would normally do. It actually quite deliberately throws up challenging, unusual situations. That's the critical issue. Are you able to handle abnormal situations? A pilot can fly for a year, and that's a critical term in this case, and encounter no unusual circumstances. A proficiency check deliberately introduces those challenging circumstances to ensure that if and when they do arise, the pilot will be capable of dealing with them.
Senator, if I can add something, if I may, Chair, the type of, these are medical evacuation